From its inception, the Hollywood film industry has scripted countless roles for female actresses, depicting them as the classy and sophisticated ingenue, the curvaceous blonde bombshell, the sexy and sometimes dangerous heroine, the damsel in distress, waiting helplessly to be rescued. However, in recent times, actresses have actually begun to transcend such stereotypes by finally filling roles that depict empowered, strong women, rather than demure and subservient women secondary to male characters. Now, more actresses than ever depict female heroes and independent, successful women, and star in films that aren't centered on a patriarchal love dynamic. Despite these considerable strides towards gender equality in the film industry, something still doesn't seem just quite right. Wait a second. All of these actresses are white. What about the significant minority that our nation claims to represent? The other people that have written our nation's history for centuries? Answer. Black women, while an integral part of our nation's identity, are largely absent from such central, uplifting roles. Instead, African American women have been shoved into roles that reinforce persisting stereotypes about Black women and perpetuate racism in our nation. But why? Well, we're going to take a look at some of the stereotypical roles that Black women are repeatedly cast into to try to explain this disparity between Black and white actresses.
One day, when the glory comes,
I guess we should start at the beginning. Perhaps the earliest and most famous representation of Black females in Hollywood came with the character of Mammy, the strong-willed and beloved caretaker in the 1939 American film Gone with the Wind. This cultural image was created out of efforts to hang on to the institution of slavery, a way of life viewed by many white Southerners as unfortunately gone with the wind. It was created to contradict abolitionist views that slavery was evil and inhumane. By portraying this loving Mammy character as content in her subservient position and beloved by her surrogate white family, pro-slavery Americans argued that Mammy's real-life counterparts were in fact benefiting from their subordinate positions. Mammy is strict yet loving, despite having a voice and putting her white children in their places when necessary.
If you don't care what folks says about this family, I do. I has told.
Mammy still knows her position as a docile, obedient servant. Mammy puts the white family's needs above her own, seemingly out of love. Yet, in doing this, such a character has come to see herself as a Mammy, thereby accepting the subordinate position.
Start praying!
Mammy, as well as other Mammies that followed this character's initial debut, is always portrayed as a larger Black woman, dressed modestly for efficiency in the household. In this sense, Mammy serves to relieve white women's anxieties of having another woman in the house due to this asexuality. Even though we are no longer in the 1940s, this image of the Black woman as a kind yet outspoken caretaker continues to pervade American culture. With the advent of the 1960s and 70s onward, a new cinematic conception of African American women gained relevance, that of the Black woman as extremely sexualized, provocative, and promiscuous. This conception also had its roots in American slavery. Slavery was indeed codified on the bodies of African American women. Laws of maternal descent were passed in as early as the 1600s that declared the statuses of children to be determined by that of the mother. This essentially encouraged white slave owners to rape and have sexual intercourse with their Black female slaves, since any illegitimate children that resulted would only increase their slave population and therefore their economic profit. Because of this, throughout history, an image has persisted of Black women as overly sexualized and promiscuous due to the many unwanted advances they experienced at the hands of their white masters. With the advent of the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, and specifically the Black Power movement, leaders like Malcolm X encouraged Black men to seize their Black manhood, which manifested itself into a Black patriarchy. Now, Black men started treating Black women as their white counterparts did. Michelle Wallace reflects a commonly shared sentiment among her fellow African American women of the time. The message of the Black movement was that I was being watched, on probation as a Black woman, that any signs of aggressiveness, intelligence, or independence would mean I'd be denied even the one role still left to me, my man's woman. Black men were threatening me with being deserted, with being alone. As Wallace describes, the one role she was allowed to inhabit was that of her man's woman, his sexualized and voiceless objectified possession, who was of no use to the Black Revolution except to fulfill her man's needs. In 1986, the Black director Spike Lee came out with She's Gotta Have It, a film that focuses on the sex life of Nola Darling, a young, attractive Black American woman, and her experiences with her 3 Black male lovers. Nola Darling's defining characteristic is her sexuality, and she's treated as a commodity because of that.
With Nola, you get 4 days, I'll get 3.
She's often presented from her bed, which she reveals to be the only place she can make love. This simply reinforces a stereotype of black women that has persisted since the days of slavery.
Nola knew what she wanted. And she's gotta have it.
In 2001, the critically acclaimed film Monsters Ball was released. In 2002, lead actress Halle Berry became the first woman of color to win an Oscar for a leading role. Despite this groundbreaking moment, throughout the movie, Berry was constantly nude and engaged in graphic sex with the film's white male actors, which brings to life that exact same fantasy. Critics argued that Berry received this award mostly because she whored herself out in front of the camera and that she wouldn't have been able to be recognized if she kept her clothes on.
We're the kids in America. We're the kids in America.
With the advent of the 1990s to early 2000s, directors and filmmakers realized they needed to add some diversity to all white casts, but without having black or other minority characters completely dominate the films. With that said, many commercial movies began starring black actresses as quintessential best friends, sidekicks for the white female protagonist that existed primarily to advise, mentor, or assist her. This black character was depicted as fiercely loyal and oftentimes sassy, the spunky best friend who helps her white friend through the plot of the movie, while her own individual storyline remains either non-existent or largely marginalized, always with a happy, simple ending. This casting trick allowed directors to get away with continuing to cast white actresses in lead roles and push black women further into more minor roles.
Be sure, we will be sure.
Now, some argue that some television shows offer opportunities for black women to transcend such stereotypical roles. Shonda Rhimes' political thriller TV series Scandal, starring African-American Kerry Washington as its protagonist, is often cited as a prime example of this. Washington's character, Olivia Pope, is strong, successful, and assertive. However, Pope is portrayed throughout the show's seasons as having affairs with influential white male characters and regularly relinquishing her power through sex. However, there has been some progress in the film industry. There was recently a remake of the classic film Annie, starring a mixed-race cast and a black child actress named Quvenzhané Wallis in place of the stereotypical red-haired, freckled, light-skinned protagonist. The film Akeelah and the Bee depicts a young black girl as intelligent, talented, and hardworking, defying many of the odds presented towards her in her quest to become a spelling bee champion. To the film adaptation of the best-selling novel The Secret Life of Bees, which depicted a group of strong, black, independent sisters. There was recently the first ever black Disney princess, Tiana, in Princess and the Frog. Despite critics' points that Black Annie served as a social commentary reversing the roles of blacks and whites, and that Tiana was simply Disney's response to racial criticism, it is in fact a start. However, this start doesn't diminish previous years of Hollywood's oppression. The persisting inequality of black actresses in movies isn't just on screen. The American film industry simply broadcasts what is actually true in real life. The mammy archetype reflects how so many women of color are actually employed as babysitters, housekeepers, and caretakers to liberate white women from the home. The wild and sexual stigma reflects unequal treatment between black and white women that have been raped. When stories are circulated throughout the public media about rape, stories about white female victims dominate, while black victims are often not addressed. The marginalized black best friend role symbolizes how young black girls are taught to idolize the white dolls and white Disney princesses, growing up to view themselves as different and not as pretty, popular, or accepted. It's clear that two-dimensional portrayals of life on the big screen must change, but that means that real life must undergo a transformation as well. Violence towards women of color, whether through marginal roles or physical acts in everyday life, must cease. Throughout history, black women have been marginalized, whether it's through the black civil rights movement, which was largely dominated by males, or through the feminist movement, which continues to be dominated by white women campaigning for issues that pertain mostly to white women. It's 2015. Now is the time to stop this growing number of stereotypical film roles for black women, and instead begin to place them in roles that are more positive. Perhaps a film starring a black female superhero will inspire one young black girl to take such a stance, and things can go from there. Change starts small.
Glory, oh, glory, glory. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon.
formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died